Chapter 1, Awakening. Max woke to unfamiliar sounds. There was no traffic or the ticking of the clock which sat by his nightstand. No, what was there was the chirping of birds and the rushing of water. His eyes fluttered open and he didn't lay in his bed but on a forest floor. His gaze was on the forest roof. Through its green leaves shone bright light, sunlight, warm on his skin. The air was fresh, like when he had been to the Alps, unpolluted. Birds flew overhead, chirping in a steady rhythm. This was a nice dream. Perhaps, once he woke up, he should go camping, enjoy nature a bit. He stood up, slow, not in any kind of hurry. The ground under him was wet, as if it had rained a few days prior. Not muddy, just a bit wet. There was forest in every direction. It was peaceful, with just the sounds of nature around him. Following the sound of rushing water, he quickly found a small creek, which ran across the woods. Peering in its surface, he found an unfamiliar face looking back. Short, black hair, Asian features and eyes a striking, unnatural shade of gold. Snort! Max's head turned around to see a wild boar charging at him. His peace and quiet was broken, replaced with fear. That beast had to be at least a meter tall and it was charging right at him, tusks ready to gore him. He looked away, throwing his hand forward. As soon as the fingers met the boar, something triggered, like a switch flipped and the boar was gone in a shower of blood, leaving behind only a small heap of powder. Immediately, he knew the chemical composition of the beast, its biological anatomy and even that it had a wound under the right knee. It was so much information that he didn't know what to do with it. His head hurt for a few seconds at the waves of information before he went back to reality. He could smell the boar's blood, rich in copper, see the dust in front of him. This was the Overhaul quirk from My Hero Academia. This had to be a dream, but on the other hand, it all felt so real and he didn't know half of the information which he had learned when disassembling the beast. What if this wasn't a dream? He had to assume it wasn't. If this was a dream, no harm would come from treating it like it's real, but on the other hand, if this was real and he treated it like a dream, it could very well end in a gruesome and painful death. Looking back at the creek, the water, once stained red, was now returning to its clear color. Only now did he realize that his hand was stained red, so he washed the blood off of it. The cool and pleasant feeling of the fresh water was too realistic for a dream. Once he was clean again, he looked around. Again, forest in every direction, so he decided to follow the creek downstream. Occasionally, he would hear something moving through the thicket, but otherwise it was a calm day, with warm wind and the smell of sap coming from some of the trees. Despite walking for hours, he never seemed to get anywhere. Just more trees, a few animals here and there and plenty of fruit hanging from the trees or bushes. He didn't recognize half of them. Not wanting to risk it, he stuck with those he could identify, like apples. He couldn't risk getting poisoned while in fuck knows where, the fuck knows how far away from the next hospital, if there even were hospitals around. For all he knew, this could be the Stone Age, with how unpolluted the air was. When day turned to night with still no sign of civilization, May knew he had to do something about shelter. He hadn't seen any big animals after the boar, but he certainly didn't want to jinx it, only for a wolf to come charging out of the thicket. So, he placed his hand on a big tree and activated Overhaul, but not with the intention to destroy but to rebuild. He envisioned a small hut made out of wood. He didn't know much about this stuff, but a wooden box didn't require much imagination. As he was laying on the floor, he wished for his mattress. The wooden floor was cold and hard, not exactly the best for comfort. He closed his eyes, trying to ignore the unpleasantness. He fell asleep quickly. Without the constant noise of traffic, falling asleep was easier, even without comfort. He awoke to voices. When did this get here? Don't know, wasn't here a week ago. How does it even hold up? I see no nails. English. Great, he didn't have to learn a new language from scratch. But even more important, these were people he heard, actual people, outside his box. He jumped up and dusted off his clothes. Okay, you can do this, Max, you can do this. With shaky hands, he reached for one of the walls and disintegrated it. Whoa! What in the seven hells was that? A man spoke. He was tall and muscular, with a lumberman's axe at his side. His hair was cut short and greasy, like it hadn't been washed in some time. Next to him stood a younger man, maybe 19, with straw blonde hair and watery blue eyes. Hello gentlemen, Max did a little bow, could you tell me where I am? I am lost. Ermi, the King's Wood. How did you do that? The younger man pointed at the disintegrated wall. King's Wood, hey? Could be many things, where is the next big city, he asked, completely ignoring the question. 2 days north you find the King's Road Lord and from there you follow it till you find King's Landing, the older man explained. Why did that sound so familiar? King's Road, King's Landing, the guy calling him Lord, wait isn't this, I am in the Crownlands. As in Westeros? Where else would you be, the north? The young man snorted. Thank you for your help. I will go now. Okay. The two looked at each other and shrugged. They didn't particularly care what this stranger did do, they had work to do after all. Westeros, the Crownlands, this could be a fine opportunity to build something worthwhile. Who cares how he got here, all that matters was making the best of it. Chapter 2, Weirwood Sap. After another day in the King's Wood, Max reached a small town, deep within the forest. This was most likely where the men had come from. It was lined with small wooden huts which were not in good shape. The wood was brittle and on one house, the roof was sagging. It was a sad sight. In a motion of goodwill, he touched the hut with the sagging roof and activated Overhaul. It disassembled for but a fraction of a second before rebuilding more stable than the original had ever been. How? A voice came from behind him, weak and feeble, like a small kitten who had yet to find its voice. Turning around, he saw a small child, cheap rags for clothing, big, innocent eyes and shaggy brown hair. Max smiled at the little one. I think it looks much better now, doesn't it? She nodded slowly, gripping something in her hand harder. It looked like a wooden star with 7 prongs. The 7 who are one, or also known simply as the 7, he wondered if they really existed, like the Lord of Light did. It was possible, he supposed. How did you do that? The little girl asked, staring at the reconstructed hut. It is a gift passed down through blood, it wasn't a lie, quirks were genetic and he suspected that his children would have quirks too, at least some of them. As seen with Deku, even children of 2 parents with quirks could be quirkless. So most likely not all of his children would have one. Why is your skin that color? She asked, pointing at him. Why is yours that color? He replied. This seemed to confuse the little girl. Isn't everyone's? Evidently not, he chuckled. Evie, what now? He simply smiled and continued walking. Wait. Lord, wait. He stopped and turned around. The little girl wasn't looking up, eyes glued on the ground. Could you do that to the other huts too? Make them better? During the winter, the snow kept falling in. I don't want to feel that cold again once the summer ends. Right, the seasons on Planetos lasted years at a time. It must be hard during the winter years, when the sun seems to be chased away by the snow clouds, and what can you give me in return? We have meat. You can eat with us. She told him and his stomach grumbled. Sounds like a fair deal. What is your name, little one? Mary, and I'm 7. Mary held up 7 fingers. Well then, let's get to work. It was easy, a simple touch and the huts were better than ever. Curious eyes followed the two as they walked from hut to hut. Mary led him to her hut last. It was among the bigger ones and it was in relatively good shape. Sure, some of the wood was rotting, but compared to a few others, it was nothing. Once again, he placed his hand on the wood and reshaped it. What caught him by surprise was that amongst the wood was something different, some sort of red sap. It was only a little, distributed through the wood planks, but when he called it out of the wood, it was a coin-sized, red pearl. His powers told him that this wood wasn't oak or pine like the others, but something unfamiliar, and the sap which he reassembled outside the wood was even more mysterious. It was kind of like normal sap, but at the same time, it was very different. Something lurked hidden beneath the surface of this sap. As he held it against the light, he saw that it refracted light like a bloody diamond. Holding it, he could feel a supple pulse of an energy enter him. Like electric current, pulsating through his soul. Was this? Mary, what kind of wood is your hut made from? Daddy cut down one of those heathen weirwood trees for our home. Mary looked proud, and Max understood. A weirwood tree, a symbol of the old gods, weeping red sap like blood from its face. He had hit the jackpot. He had the power of a weirwood tree in his open palm, but how to access it? He got an idea, a stupid, reckless idea, but what was life without a little risk? Max placed the sap in his mouth. The change was immediate. Whereas the sap had previously simply leaking magic into his hand, now it was being absorbed at a rapid rate. He could feel a warmth bloom from his throat and gut, like spiderwebs, creeping through his system. The energy slowly intensified and seeped into his every cell. He knew instinctively that it was Overhaul's doing. Had a normal person swallowed the sap, it wouldn't have broken down. The human gut had no proteins to dissolve this kind of sap, but with Overhaul taking care of that, the magic was free to enter his bloodstream. It felt as if he had been watching life through a dense fog before, and now for the first time, he looked at what the world was really like. The colors were more vibrant and vivid, the sounds more crisp, and the smells sharper. "Are you okay, Lord? You have been standing there for a good while," Mary asked him, tugging at his clothes. "Yeah, I'm fine, better than fine really," Max smiled brightly, which seemed to ease the little girl's worry. "Now, you said something about meat." "Yes. Daddy just came back with a deer a few hours ago. Let me show you." Her father, after having been brought up to speed, was more than willing to let him eat with them that day. "I have been meaning to fix these huts, but you have beaten me to it." "You keep saying that since winter ended," Mary chuckled, bouncing up and down. "I'm hungry, when is the stew ready?" "Soon, dear, soon," her mother said, standing above a cauldron, which smelled heavenly after almost 2 days of eating nothing but wild fruit. Chapter 3, Weirwood Trees. The stew was indeed good. A bit bland to his 21st century palate, but still undeniably delicious. "Where do you hail from, Lord? Dorne perhaps? I heard that the people of Dorne have different skin colors," Mary's father asked in between of bites. He had no table manners, and plenty of stew was stuck in his full beard, not that he seemed to mind. He was a simple man with simple taste. Max's mind raced, trying to come up with a cover story. A stranger with a strange ability, having an Asian complexion, right? "I hail from Yeti, far in the east of Essos." "Yeti, you say? Don't think I've ever heard about them." "Even as you get older, you still learn new things. What is it like?" "It is warm, much like how I imagine Dorne and the cities. King's Landing looks like a little village in comparison." He hoped desperately that he was right. He had read up on Yeti before, but without his mobile phone, he had to recite from memory, so he kept things vague. The small folk family clung to his lips though. They had likely never been farther away from their village than King's Landing. This Yeti sounded strange and exotic. Their imagination was running rampant. After they were done eating, Mary invited him to stay, and he accepted quickly. It was getting late and he liked the little family. He could spend the night here without worry. It was as he drifted off into unconsciousness that a dream, or perhaps a vision, came to him. His mind drifted through the air, only hazily aware where it was, rising higher and higher until it clicked into another mind. He could feel wings flapping under the wind and saw the ground beneath, racing past. He could feel a pull, deeper and deeper into the forest, past large oaks and pines, heading east from where the village was. Then, there were the calls, caw, 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 until he saw the source of it. Dozens of ravens, sitting on a massive weirwood tree, cawing at him. Their black feathers almost seemed to blend into the darkness above. The weirwood tree cried red sap, the same shade as the raven's crimson eyes. He landed on the ground, eyes transfixed on the visage carved upon the white bark, a bloody grin which seemed to call out to him. Not a voice but a feeling, like he needed to get closer. He hopped forward, his bird legs landing on the ground again and again, advancing by inches each time. When he was directly in front of it, he pecked at the bark, and as soon as his beak touched the bark, there was a flash of images, a golden lion cub, crippled and sickly, transforming slowly into a healthy adult with a thick mane, then an empty stretch of land, which slowly became a bustling city. Walls grew from the ground, carts full of silver ore being wheeled out of mines and people walking through the city as it grew. First it was just a small fort, with a little village around it, but it grew and grew, until it stretched as far as the eye could see. The final vision was of a mighty kraken, dead, with a silver hand grasping its heart, or what he assumed to be its heart. It looked nothing like a human heart, but it beat in a steady rhythm. Then, he awoke with a gasp. His head was swimming. He needed to find that tree. Those visions, they had to be from consuming that sap. Green dreams and skin changing, those were the gifts that just that little amount of sap gave him. What would happen if he consumed more? He could shit on the old gods, he wanted power. He was strong already, but he could always become stronger. A coin-sized piece was enough for him to start skin changing. What could a whole tree worth of the stuff do? Sun hadn't even risen yet when he snuck out of the village. He walked in the darkness, the moonlight barely illuminated the path which he had to take. It was familiar, he had seen the exact path in his vision, it was etched into his mind. The way there wasn't as straightforward on the ground as it had been in the air. He needed to deviate from the path every now and again, but he never lost sight of the path to the weirwood tree. He could hear the ravens before he could see the tree, cawing loudly and constantly. The tree was even more massive in person. In the body of that bird, everything had seemed big, but only as a human could he appreciate the sheer size of the tree. Crimson leaves contrasting against ash-white bark, and a smiling face leaking sap carved onto its surface. He could feel the magic seeping into the ground and the air around it, like a beating heart, only instead of blood being pumped, it was pure magic. His finger trembled as they reached the tree. Before he could even think of using Overhaul, he was filled with a wave of ecstasy as more visions came. It was like a wicked good trip, and he couldn't even remember half of the visions he was shown, but when it concluded, he knew for certain that he couldn't harm this tree. There was a reason why the children of the forest and later the first men worshipped these things. When he had touched it, he could feel the connection between each and every weirwood tree in the 7 kingdoms and beyond the wall. Destroying even just one of them was out of the question. Still, he desired power, but he could get the sap without harming the ancient monument. Not as much as he'd have liked, but still. What he scraped from the face was 3 or 4 times as much as had been in the hut, and he swallowed them without hesitation. The magic channels in his body which had appeared when he swallowed that first bit of sap were flooded with more magic and grew wider, stronger. It felt as if lightning was coursing through his veins. Chapter 4, Bandits. As he walked towards the King's Road, at night he kept having visions, skin changing into birds, squirrels, deers, and so on. He looked forward to his sleep every time. Being an animal, it was so freeing. Max finally reached the King's Road and began walking north towards King's Landing. It took not even 2 full days before something interesting happened. Day was slowly turning to night and the street was silent. Not even birds were chirping, which should have been his first warning sign. Animals got quiet when a big predator came close, or in this case a large group of people. Halt! The voice was deep and booming. People walked onto the King's Road, a dozen or so, armed with swords and axes. The biggest and meanest of them, obviously their leader, walked over, his short sword leveled at Max, growling, "Drop your valuables." Max raised his hands. "I have nothing worth stealing," he said honestly, but the bandits didn't believe him. "You are wearing silk and you're saying you have no coin? No jewels? Don't try this shit with us. This ain't our first day," a smaller man chuckled. "Now give us everything and maybe we'll let you live." Max's eyes scanned them as they were approaching. Overhaul was strong, but he didn't know if he could restore his own body from a slit throat. If only he could touch the ground. One touch would be enough to bind them using earth and stone. The leader was close. Could Max drop low fast enough before he was killed? "Fine, if you want to do this the hard way, pretty boy. Moxie, release." The air whistled and there was a sharp pain in his arm. Blood started pouring. His head snapped to it and saw an arrow stuck in his arm. The pain was immense. "Fuck me. Now ready to give us everything?" "I said it already, I don't." Another shot pierced his arm. They were clever, they didn't hit any vital spots. They would still kill him, he knew. That was their true cruelty. They could just kill their enemies quickly, but they found joy in watching them suffer. They were sick, truly sick. An idea came with impulses of pain. As the third arrow hit him, he let himself fall onto the stone ground. "Can't even stand a little pain? You truly are some pampered lordling, ha! You will feel a lot more pain than I did," Max growled. His fingers finally grasped stone. "Still got a big mouth, hey? Moxie re." It all happened in a matter of moments. Not even seconds but moments. The ground beneath broke apart and reshaped to bind the dozen men in shackles of earth and stone. "The fuck?" Max ripped the arrows out of his arm and then touched his own skin. He only broke apart his arm, but the pain was beyond anything he had felt before, like an acid bath, being electrocuted and flayed alive all at once. The pain didn't last for more than a second, but it was hell. He should avoid being hurt in the future. Then, his gaze landed on the leader, who was staring at him with fear. "I told you, you'd feel more pain than me, and I intend to keep that promise." Max approached the squirming man. "No. No. No. Please. How many of your victims cried for mercy? I will show you what my hands can do." He grabbed the man's arm and broke it apart before reconstructing it. He screamed, but Max wasn't done. He kept doing it over and over till he passed out from shock. Satisfaction and horror swept through his being all at once. He now knew how painful that was, and he had done this to another person? No. That was a monster. Besides his appearance, he had nothing to do with a human, right? The others got a quick death. The archer Moxie might have deserved a bit of torture too, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Death was near instant. Next, he collected their things, armor, swords, axes, money pouches. He overhauled the weapons and armor, receiving quite a bit of steel and leather, which he placed into a leather backpack he created. The money pouches were quite rich in loot: 2 golden dragons, 22 silver moons and 62 copper stars. Outbid the metal, he also overhauled a bit of scale mail and a sword. He didn't know how to use it, but armed, he attracted less attention. With a smile, he cleaned himself. All that blood reeked. He restored the part of the road which he had used to bind the bandits. Seeing as it was already late, he went to sleep off the road, under a lone oak tree. As he drifted off to sleep, he took the shape of a raven, flying high above a city. The Red Castle identified it as King's Landing. His sharp eyes watched the few people still around go about their days. He could feel a piece of parchment bound to his leg, and he knew where he was flying, to the Grand Maester's chambers. The chambers were far high up, just below the library tower. Landing on the windowsill, Grand Maester Pycelle smiled, but the smile didn't last long, as he read the message. He rushed away, and Max, as the crow, peeked at the message. Balon Greyjoy has named himself the King of the Iron Isles and sunk the Lannister fleet. He and his lot have been reaving the western coast as if it were the days of old. We must act quickly. Lord Tywin Lannister requests the King's assistance in cutting this rebellion at its root. The Westerlands have already mobilized their banners and await the Crown's answer. Maester Crelin. The Greyjoy Rebellion? At least he now knew where in the timeline he was. This could be just the thing he needs to build his legacy, his legend. Max awoke with a huge grin on his face. Chapter 5, Conscription. Max walked into the city. Everything was abuzz, people running from one street to another, blacksmiths firing up forges like there was no tomorrow, men who looked like they had never held a sword in their lives were being handed freshly forged weapons. The news of war had escaped into the general public and people were conflicted. Families were being torn apart as fathers, brothers, and sons were being conscripted to fight against the Greyjoys. You there, bring these swords to the guard. A blacksmith handed Max a bundle of swords, which laid heavy in his arms and pointed at a guard's building. Actually, I'm not. You wear armor and carry a sword, you go to war. Be happy you get your own armor. Most of the poor sods have to go in with nothing but the clothes on their back and a shoddy spear. They'd be lucky if they got a shield, the blacksmith told him before returning to his workplace. Guess I won't have to convince people to let me join, he chuckled and carried the swords to the building. A gruff-looking man in the golden cloak of a city guardsman nodded, taking the weapons from him. Where should I go now? He looked out, into the streets buzzing with activity. You can go fetch more of those weapons. We can use every help we can get. The king wants to start marching in 5 days. Not enough time in my opinion, but who am I to question a lord, much less the king of the 7 kingdoms? The gruff-looking man handed the swords to a flock of other guards, who in turn disappeared with them. He had no time to sightsee or relax. 5 days of fetching weapons and food, of loading them onto carts and of going to sleep way past sundown and rising well before sunup. His only breaks were to eat and to shit. He would have loved to maybe sneak into the crypts beneath King's Landing or explore the city, but every hand was needed. The city worked like an ant colony during these days, marching in a chaotic way, yet never losing sight of the objective, the preparations for war. When the 5th day arrived, everything was done, they were ready to depart. The king, handsome and tall, with plenty of muscle, rode in front of the rows and rows of soldiers. Max was near the front and so could hear the speech which the good king shouted out, "Today we march, not as sirs, lords and small folk, but as the might of the 7 kingdoms. The squids think they can shit in our faces and we just happily wipe it off and smile through it all, but no, I say. No to this disrespect. No to the little fuckers who think a stag is but prey. The stag has felled the dragon, ground it under its hooves, and the squids will soon learn that it wasn't just by luck but by overwhelming might. Your sons and daughters, mothers and wives will wait for you to return, and by the 7, it will be the Greyjoys to blame if you don't. I will not sit idly behind you, waiting for one army to kill another, no. I will ride at your side and smash those iron-born cunts into paste. Today we ride out and carry our names into the history books. Anyone who can present me with a Greyjoy head, I'll make you a lord, give you lands, or if you already have all of that, will grant you money which will make the Lannisters blush. Now, let's go. Ours is the fury." The soldiers took a minute before they screamed in unison, a fire ignited within them. Some called out the Baratheon words, whilst others called their liege lord's words. The noise was deafening. People crashed their weapons into their shields, creating deep, thundering boom boom boom-s. Their march began with vigor, but after even just a few days, the enthusiasm had died down, as they were monotonously marching through the land. Soldiers next to each other started telling their life stories. "I was a baker's son just a week ago," one of them, a young lad with strawberry red hair, admitted. "Mother was worried but I insisted on going. My father died fighting in Robert's rebellion. I will make it through though, I'll make him proud from up there." His hands tightened around a star of the 7, "I have to make it through, I promised my mother." "What about you?" You don't come from Westeros, do you? Max smiled. I hail from far into Essos, from the Golden Empire of Yeti. I came to the Seven Kingdoms only recently. It was by sheer coincidence that the Greyjoys rebelled shortly after I came to these lands. I still haven't become accustomed to the lack of spice in Westerosi cuisine. Back in Essos, everything had so much more flavor. Cooey, what now? Cuisine, you know, food. Why not call it food? Why these fancy words? The boy shook his head. I think we have plenty of seasoning. I love my mother's garlic bread. You haven't tasted food until you had curry, Max swooned. Surely there was curry in this world, right? Essos was like Asia after all, so they probably had more spices than what he found in the inns of Westeros. Hell, the lords and ladies probably used spices too, though he was for now a commoner. King Robert's promise of lordship for bringing him a Greyjoy's head was tempting. Surely with Overhaul, he could breach the walls and get a few iron-born cunts, as the king had so eloquently put it. He wondered what land he'd get if he managed to get one of the squids. Maybe a domain in the north? He liked the cold and the Starks were honorable. Plus in the north, he wouldn't have to worry about being branded a heretic for using Overhaul. That was also true for Dorne, but he didn't like the heat. Then again, he wouldn't say no to a place in the Vale. Chapter 6, Reactions. Ah, seven hells, one of the soldiers said as they were resting. He had his shoe in his hand, his finger sticking through the hole in its sole. Those craftsmen have been slacking off. I only had these for a few moons. Where am I supposed to get new shoes and how am I going to pay for them? Here, let me look. Max held out his hand. The soldier gave him the shoe and he activated Overhaul. One split second and the shoe was good as new. Here you go. The group of soldiers who had witnessed that stared at Max with open eyes. This wasn't just carelessness, this was to look and see whether the average man would kill him over his quirk. In the middle of the camp, no one would be stupid enough to attack, and if they did, he'd have every right to kill them, but all his worry was for naught, as the men around him didn't shout witchcraft or draw their swords. No, they looked at him with a childlike sparkle in their eyes. Seven hells, how did you do that? Is that something everyone in Yeti can do? If so, I was clearly born in the wrong country. Show us again. Show us again. Max smiled. It seems the religious doctrine of the seven wasn't as burnt into their minds as he had thought. It made sense, he thought. Not everyone would be a religious fanatic. No, not everyone can do that. It is something passed down through the bloodline, and that was nothing. Someone got a copper piece. The soldiers scrambled to get their money pouches and held out a few copper pennies each. He took a few in his open palm and closed his eyes. He envisioned what to create, its edges both sharp and smooth, its volume, its shape. Then, once he had a perfect image in his head, he activated Overhaul. When he opened his eyes again, in his hands were no more coins but a stag made of pure copper. Well, not entirely pure, some of the coins had impurities, but it was photorealistic. You could see the hairs on its body, the scratches from battle on its antlers, and so much more. The soldiers wouldn't have been surprised if the statue began moving, that is how detailed it was. I know of a few merchants who would kill for this level of detail. This isn't something which is easy to make. It would take months of hard work by a regular craftsman, and you did it in minutes. He was baffled. This soldier had been a jeweler, and his magnum opus, his best work, which had taken him over a year to complete, paled in comparison. He was more than a little jealous. Is there a limit to how much you can change? There are certain limits, he admitted. I wouldn't be able to build a castle in one go, though it went unsaid that he could probably do it in a few days, if not a few weeks. The true range of his abilities depended on the material and whether he just wanted to destroy or also rebuild. Some materials, like stone, were easier to affect. It seemed as though anything alive, using that word very lightly as long dead wood also counted, was by far harder to use. He doubted he could affect a whole dragon at once, an elephant would probably be his upper limit. That is if he want to destroy and reconstruct. Doing only the destruction was much easier. Now non-living things, such as dirt and stone, now those, he could build walls out of. Thanks to Overhaul, he could raise a fortress like the Red Keep in a handful of weeks, instead of the decade which it would take using human labor. Truly this power was marvelous. The only downside? It took a toll. He couldn't spam the power infinitely. He had to rest, especially after larger scale uses. Hey, do you want to marry my sister? She is a good cook. No thank you. Had to try, didn't I? They laughed together. How about some wine? I still have some arbor red with our names on it, one of the soldiers mentioned. You mean you are going to steal some from the supply cart, again? He had done that a few times now. So far no one had caught him. In the end, once again, they had a bottle of arbor red to share, to a glorious battle once we reached the coast. They were tipsy by the end of the night, not drunk. 6 people couldn't get drunk of one bottle, but they had a good time. Asleep, Max's consciousness drifted into the body of a falcon, high above the open sea. He could see a great battle on the ships. Some were the typical Westerosi ships, whilst others were the more agile reaving vessels. It was deepest night and yet they were still fighting. The Iron Men slowly started losing the battle. They were outnumbered and underprepared, a real battle. They could plunder the coastlines, but as soon as the fight got taken to them, they struggled. With no victory in sight, the Iron Men fled, tails between their legs. What is dead may never die is a nice sentiment, but once it actually came to facing death, only few could do it. These ones clearly weren't of the make to face death. No, they fled when things got too hot. Chapter 7, Jewelry. News hit the camp 3 days later. Lord Stannis Baratheon, Master of Ships, had won a decisive victory against the Iron Fleet. The king could be heard laughing from several tents over. That same day, Lord Eddard Stark joined the host as they were crossing through a small village. A young baker's girl could be seen visiting his tent, and it was then that everyone knew the world would have another bastard. Hey, I heard you can make things. A man asked, gruff and bald, with no beard and a scar running over his eye. He held up a few silver coins. I need something to bring back to my wife, and I doubt that the Ironborn cunts will have anything worthy of her beauty. I can't afford to pay a jeweler, but I can give you a silver moon if you make these into a nice necklace for her. With pleasure. Women love jewelry, that is a constant from Yeti to these western lands. Any favorite animal? Max let the coins dance in between his fingers like others might do with a pen. My wife loves to feed the ducks, he admitted. We run the bakery and she feeds them with the bread that didn't sell. Ducks et. Max let the coins cling rhythmically against one another. The sharp and constant metallic sound was garnering the attention of the other soldiers. They crowded around him, waiting for him to use Overhaul. Many of them had witnessed it already, but it was no less impressive, and to those who hadn't seen it, only heard of it, it was a spectacle which they desperately wanted to see in action. Max closed his eyes and used Overhaul. A necklace of silver appeared. It was a chain of silver, with the centerpiece of a flying duck on it, but before the soldier could reach for it, he shook his head. Not good enough. The duck at its center wasn't quite right. The wings were too big, the bill too crooked. He might be able to freely change its shape, but he wasn't an expert on duck anatomy. He reworked the necklace 2 more times before he was satisfied with the product. Here, now you can have it. Thank you so much. My wife will be elated. The man bowed and handed him a silver coin, as promised though with it, he also was handed a few copper pieces, which he pocketed. Can you make one for my daughter too? I don't have any silver but plenty of copper, another soldier asked, pulling out a few copper pennies. And so it was that Max spent the next few days making jewelry from coins. The intricacies which these works required made him learn a lot about his power. He could create large structures, like with the bandits, with ease, but these detailed works were quite a bit different. One stray thought and the whole design came out looking wrong. Now, compared to this world's skill, without machines to do the intricate steps, the shoddy works were already of great quality, but he wasn't from this world, so his expectations for himself were quite high. The news about these beautiful pieces spread like a fire. At first it was 1 or 2 requests in a day, but by the end of the week, he had close to a dozen requests each day, both by lowborn and highborn. When it just didn't stop growing, he implemented the 7 requests a day policy, since he still needed time to train in swordsmanship. Yes, during their rests, he learned how to properly swing a sword. It was his payment from a few knights which had requested his services. Sure, with Overhaul, he could end a fight at a moment's notice, but a man with a sword just had more reach, and yet again, he wondered whether he could reconstruct a cutthroat on himself. Not something he was willing to try out. It was during one of these training sessions that a king's guard, a white cloak, approached him, Max of Yti. Max, whose brow was furrowed and covered in sweat, turned around, sword still in hand. His golden eyes pierced the white cloak's soul. Yes? What is it, my lord? I'm training right now. King Robert Baratheon has requested your presence, the white cloak, whom he didn't recognize, told him, and his brow furrowed even deeper. The king? What did the king want from him? Surely he wasn't interested in jewelry. King Robert was a warrior first, a king second. He had no use for jewelry, or at least so Max had thought. He sheathed his sword and followed the seer. They walked towards the king's tent. The white cloak pushed open the curtain and revealed the king and Lord Eddard Stark, sitting and drinking from big goblets. The king was laughing, whilst Lord Stark was stoically sipping from his goblet. Your Grace, I have brought you the sorcerer. That last word was laced with quite a bit of venom. King Robert slowly placed his goblet on the table in front of him. Him? I expected a sorcerer to be frail and skinny. He looks like a warrior, not a weak magician. There was no venom when the king said sorcerer. He held up a golden ring. I have heard rumors about what you can do. You made this, didn't you? Amazing workmanship, but I heard you could do something more, destroy walls perhaps? You see, the entrance to Pike is guarded by walls which would take significant effort to breach. If the Ironborn cunts were warriors, they would meet us on the field, but they are too cowardly. We would use many good men if we breached it normally, but, and Ned here suggested this, you could break them down easily, couldn't you? I could, yes, but I'd need to get close. I have to touch whatever I want to destroy or reshape. Archers could kill me in a few seconds. I though so. King Robert deflated, ready to send him away, but Max wasn't done. I have an idea how we could make this work though. It is called a turtle formation, the Unsullied use them. He explained the Roman testudo formation. The king looked more excited by the minute. Great! If this works, I will make you a lord. Ned, you said that dragon something was still open for grabs, right? See Dragon Point. It has plenty of wildlife and woods, as well as many weirwood trees. At first, Max was disappointed, but when he heard weirwood, that all changed. Who cares if the area wasn't that grand right now? With Overhaul, he could terraform the area to his whims. Sounds like a deal. Great. Those cunts won't know what happened. Ha ha ha. Come take a drink with us. Chapter 8, Forsaking Humanity. Soon, they reached Sigurd, their final stop on land. From here, they would board ships and attack the Iron Isles. Of course, the king wanted Pike for himself, taking a not insignificant force with him, but that was for a few days later. For now, they were resting. They had been marching for over half a moon, and it took its toll on everyone. It had been days since they had seen a settlement, even just a small village, and, well, let's just say the brothels of Sigurd had quite a few patrons. Not Max though, no, he enjoyed a woman's touch as much as anyone, but he was more interested in exploring the city as a bird. Sometimes a raven, sometimes a dove, and also a seagull once. To everyone else, it looked like he was sleeping. It wasn't too uncommon after weeks of travel to have a strange sleep schedule when you finally had time to rest, especially since he had no horse to ride on. As these animals, he found plenty of hidden passageways used to evacuate the town's citizens and a few which led deep underground. In these tunnels, he found something very interesting. A small chest, barely big enough to hold a man's head and shut close with many layers of rusting iron chains. The wood was rotten and had clearly not been opened since before the conquest. On the way back out, he memorized the path and the following day made his way down there as himself. The way down was long and the air was stale, though still breathable. The ground was layered in dust and his every movement left a trail in it. He didn't care though. No one had been in this part of Sigurd for centuries, no reason why this should change now. His fingers held onto his torch like a lifeline, his only source of light in these pitch-black corridors. As he went deeper, he could feel the magical energy thickening. It wasn't like the weirwood trees, those felt like connection, like the roots of the spiritual digging into the earthly realm, but this felt like power, like the deepest depths of the ocean where no light reached and no sound could be heard. It wasn't connecting him to something more but trying to dominate him. He knew, on a spiritual level, that had he been weaker-willed or had he not absorbed the magic of the weirwood sap, this force, whatever it was, would have crushed him alive. Not physically but mentally. As he reached the chamber, he could not walk as freely anymore. He reached for the chest, each inch that he advanced took increasingly more effort. When he disintegrated the chains, the pressure lifted. Overhaul informed him that there were arrays of runes carved on them, each rune only a few millimeters thick. Whoever had placed this here didn't want a human hand to touch it. The magic wasn't completely gone, however. From within the chest, he could still feel that faint pulse of magic. The chains hadn't created this magic, simply amplified it. With shaking hands, Max opened the chest and inside were 3 eggs. Not like chicken eggs or even dragon eggs, no, these looked more like shark eggs, about the size of a chicken's egg each. He took one of them and popped it into his mouth. Swallowing the sap had made him a green seer and skin changer. What could this do? He swallowed it. It tasted of salt, like the sea. Overhaul broke down the egg and distributed the magic in his system. It felt as if his nerves were on fire, adjusting to the new magic. It took several minutes, agonizing minutes, for the magic to settle. It wasn't as painful as reconstructing his arm, but it still hurt like a son of a bitch. His torch had gone out when it had fallen to the ground, but he could see without a problem. Only grey shades, but it was more than a little convenient. What he felt too though was a connection to these eggs, as if the 2 remaining eggs were slowly leeching off the magic which he was subconsciously releasing. Whatever was slumbering in these eggs, it was slowly awakening. It would take weeks to hatch, but when it did, he knew something incredible would happen. He stuffed the eggs into his backpack and marched up the long tunnels. With each meter he ascended, the air became fresher and his muscles didn't burn. It was as if he was walking downhill instead of uphill. When he reached the entrance, he swung it open and walked out onto the streets. When he was walking past a puddle of water, he glanced at his reflection and did a double take. His eyes, they were slitted like a cat's. Still the striking gold color, but now reptile-like. How would he explain this? He was changing by consuming the magic. Not just spiritually, as he had thought before, but now also physically. Was it a mistake? Was he stepping away from humanity? He was worried, but then he remembered the power coursing through his veins and the enemy ahead, the Great Other, the White Walkers, led by the Night King. What mattered his humanity if he would just be killed by and join the army of the dead? Screw humanity, this was survival. Chapter 9, Destruction. Max's new look got quite a bit of attention. Soldiers who had previously drank with him refused to make eye contact, and the more religious folk called him a devil given mortal form when they thought he couldn't hear, yet he heard all of it. He didn't know whether they just weren't particularly quiet or if the egg had also enhanced his hearing. He was by far not an outcast, he had his buddies, but no one wanted to meet his eyes now. They had been striking before, like brilliant, liquid gold, but with their slitted appearance, they were unsettling. A few of the more suspicious soldiers had also thrown away the jewelry he had made, giving them to the small folk of Sigurd, who were more than happy to take them. When the day came, Max boarded the same boat as King Robert and they set out to Pike. It took them 3 days to sail into viewing distance of the island, but when they arrived at Lord Sport on Pike, they were ready. King Robert donned heavy full plate and his war armor, which any lesser man couldn't have wished to wield. The king was truly a beast upon men. They rushed into the port and started fighting against the iron men. Swords were being swung, limbs cut off, chests pierced and crushed. The king had a wild, manic grin on his face as he smashed in chests and skulls. There was a mad glint in his bright blue eyes. He showed them why he was called the demon of the trident, and this was what he lived for. War, or more specifically the battlefield, was where he shined the brightest. He had won one rebellion and was on a good way to win another. Max didn't charge recklessly like the king, he instead chose groups of Ironborn who were already engaged in battle and picked them off one by one. He couldn't die here, their whole plan needed him to be alive when they reached the walls protecting the seat of the Iron Islands. He noticed, though, that his swings with the sword packed quite a bit more punch than he was used to. His muscle mass had stayed the same, but his strength increased quite a bit. Limbs were torn from bodies and he felt free. It was like a dance, a beautiful, violent dance which never seemed to end as the Ironborn didn't back down. They were pressed back onto the barren rocks which they called home. There was no place left to run to anymore. It was do or die, because, when you play the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die. That was true for the lords sitting on the thrones, but also for the men fighting these wars. For them, it was either survival, the wall, or reuniting with their drowned god, and there was no place on the wall for these men. Win or die, he muttered as his sword clashed with an Ironborn's axe. The two blades crashed upon each other with tremendous force, and his sword, which had already killed close to 36 men, shattered. At first, there were only thin, hairline fractures, but with a night roar, the weapon smashed into 1,000 tiny pieces. The Ironborn thought himself victorious, but he let his guard down and Max gripped his axe and he overhauled it into a new sword for himself, after which, he sliced open his throat. Max took a few moments to catch his breath and orientate himself. The Ironborn were fighting fiercely. Corpses from both sides laid across the port town. Lord Eddard Stark, the Quiet Wolf, was wielding the big sword Ice, the ancestral sword of House Stark. It was bigger than was practical, and yet, the Quiet Wolf moved like it weighed nothing, weaving through attacks like a leaf in the wind, cutting like a razor blade and defending like a stone wall. Max, who had only recently taken up the sword, couldn't even follow him as he danced the dance of battle. Max was entranced when Arg! A sword struck him in the leg. An Ironborn cunt had snuck up on him and struck him where he wasn't armored. Should have gone for the head, he laughed as he rammed his sword through his attacker's throat. Then, he healed himself and focused back on the battle. That could have been ugly. Soon, they moved closer and closer to the fortifications of the island. The king gave the command and a tortoise formation was formed around Max. They moved slowly, but the archers on the walls couldn't do anything against them. They had never seen this technique before and so had no way to effectively counter it. Arrows rained, but it was of no use. When Max reached the wall, he placed a hand on it and destroyed. Uncontrolled, mindless destruction, just erasing that part of the wall in its entirety. He was spent, completely and utterly exhausted. The soldiers cheered and rushed in. As King Robert passed by him, he gave him a nod. His part of the plan was done. He fell on his ass, panting. Maybe he should have made a smaller hole, that way he could have stormed the castle with them, but now was not the time for what-ifs, now was the time for resting. His job was officially done. Chapter 10, The Fall of Balong Greyjoy. He didn't stay out of the fight completely, however, watching as a hawk as men fought each other to the death. He saw arms being lobbed off, chests being crushed and throats be slit. It was a massacre. The Ironborn men fought bravely but were overwhelmed with sheer numbers. The attack had been going on for an hour without much progress being made. The castle of Pike was better defended than he thought, and Max could feel his power returning to him. The sea water, which was spraying from the cliff sides, seemed to invigorate him. Whatever that egg had done, it was showing its usefulness. He jumped up, startling the soldiers left behind to guard him. These iron cunts think their fortress is impenetrable, that they still have a chance. They are wrong, so very wrong. Come with me, men, and let these bastards feel our fury, make them regret challenging the Baratheon dynasty. They have no idea what they have just done. For battle. For glory. For the crown. Yet. The soldiers were invigorated by his enthusiasm, and his personal attack team stormed the castle. He created a man-sized hole in the wall, not wanting to stress himself so soon after recovering his strength, and climbed in. He swung his sword, and the surprised Iron Men weren't fast enough to counter him. They died without meaning. No one would remember their names, and no stories would be told of them. We were breached. Get Lord Euron. Euron Greyjoy. Max would revel in his death. He didn't like the cunt, not one bit. When he arrived, Max was surprised to see an eye patch over one of his azure eyes. This wasn't show Euron but book Euron. No matter, he would die the same. The fuck? I expected to see the Greenland King. Who are you? His concubine? Ha ha ha. Come here, pretty boy, I will arg. Max had touched the wall, and a spike of the dark stone penetrated Euron's hand, causing him to drop his sword. The fuck? How did you do that? That is irrelevant. A dying man doesn't have the right to answers. Dying? Pretty boy, I have killed men twice your size with nothing but my bare hands. You don't stand a arg. Another spike penetrated his gut. Warm blood flew down it, forming a puddle of blood below him. Any last words, Crow's Eye? What is dead may never die. Even in the face of overwhelming power, the Crow's Eye held no ounce of fear. He had to admit, Euron was brave, but bravery didn't save you when an apex predator was stalking you. Max's cat-like, golden eyes pierced him as his sword pierced his throat. With one clean motion, the man was beheaded. He put the still bleeding head in his backpack and moved through the castle, killing men without discrimination. Through the hole he had made, many more soldiers came through. Even the king used this entrance. One breach, that was all that was needed for the keep to fall, but Max was only after one person's head, Balon. The king of Salt and Rock couldn't be allowed to live. Let Theon be groomed to inherit the lordship back in Winterfell, but the adult Greyjoy had to fall. He wouldn't change, it wasn't in his nature. So, he found Balon on the sea stone chair, and he could feel the magic radiating off the inky black stone carved to look like a kraken. It is over, great king. Your reign lasted no longer than a child with grayscale, and you will end with it. I can see that my reign has come to an end. I will swear fealty to the Iron Throne. Take me to the king, he sighed. Oh, there won't be a second chance for you, the world is better without you in it. Your eldest sons are dead, but worry not, your line won't end with you. Theon will become a lord, better, kinder, more just than you. Your line will not end, but you will. You think you can defeat me all by yourself? I will just kill you and wait for someone who will take prisoners. Ha 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 ha, he laughed, sheathing his sword. It is precisely because we are alone that your death warrant has been sealed. I can kill you with a touch. Now normally, I would have needed to kill you the old-fashioned way. No one can know that I can do this, people would fear me even more, but there are no witnesses. Ha ha ha. Balon couldn't even draw his sword before Max disintegrated his body, leaving only his head. Satisfied, he sat down on the sea stone chair, waiting for the king, covered from head to toe with blood. As soon as he sat down on the chair, he could feel sea magic flow through his body. It was the kind that he had felt before when swallowing the egg, unruly as the sea, but it didn't stay in his body for too long. Instead, it channeled into the eggs. Taking them out of his backpack, he could see them glowing in a low, blue light. Something was growing within them, a serpentine form. It grew faster than should be possible. 1 centimeter, 3 centimeters, 5, soon the eggs burst open and within his hands lay 2 serpentine beasts, small, with blue scales and discolored wings but no legs or arms. He knew what they were, sea dragons of the myths. They chirped and he could feel some sort of connection forming between them and him. He could feel that they were hungry, so very hungry, so he fed them some fish. After having eaten, they curled up around his neck, sleepy. When the other soldiers found him, with Balan's severed head on his lap, they knew the war was over, the Greyjoys had fallen and with their fall, a new magic had awoken, magic given serpentine shape. Chapter 11, House Vane. For the king. Max held his goblet high. It had been a few weeks since the Greyjoy rebellion ended. In the end Theon was sent to Winterfell and his sister was shipped off to Casterly Rock. The tourney at Lannisport was in full motion and Max was allowed to sit and drink with King Robert. The warrior king raised his goblet too, speaking, to the Iron Cunt's death. They raised their goblets to their mouths and drank. The wine was sweet and warming. Truly, a marvel of fermentation. The 2 sea dragons slept around his arms, he would have to come up with names for them soon. After the joust ended with Lord Mormont courting Lady Hightower, Robert stood up and motioned for Max to follow. The 2 of them, flanked by the king's guard, walked to the tourney ground, where King Robert addressed the people in attendance, his voice booming with authority, which made everyone stop talking and focus on him. People of the 7 kingdoms, lords and ladies, this victory against the Iron Cunts has been won not just by the lords riding at the front of the armies but also by the people actually fighting. Yes, many of them lost their lives but some others have shown great promise. This man, Max of Yti, came to Westeros as nothing but a foreigner but he was instrumental to the crushing of the Greyjoys. Not only has he broken up the wall around Pike but he also killed this king of salt and rock and presented me with his head. Those of you who followed me from King's Landing might remember my promise. I said those who presented me with a Greyjoy head would be made a lord and I aim to keep that promise. Max of Yti, with the power of the 7 kingdoms, I make you Lord of Sea Dragon Point, with all the powers that come with it. Taxes it is to collect, justice is his to bring down and the land is his to command. Max of Yti, present yourself as a Lord of the North. Max nodded, pulling out from his backpack a flag. He unfurled it and presented it to the crowd. A shattered silver hand on a field of gold. From this day on, I am Max Vane of Sea Dragon Point and my words are our work is eternal. His voice carried clear and sharp, not booming like the king's but no less penetrating, no less heard. The lords and ladies whispered amongst themselves as King Robert called for Eddard Stark. As bannerman of the Starks, you must swear both fealty to him and to me. Lord Vane, do you swear to uphold justice, to serve, to answer our calls and follow our commands? I swear it, both to your grace and my lord. Good, good. For now that is all. Amongst the lords and ladies, the opinions were split. Some honoured him for his contribution to the war whilst others branded him a sorcerer. Have you seen his eyes? Golden and like a cat's. No man has eyes like those. A demon I say. I actually like the eyes, it has an exotic charm to it, doesn't it? I heard he destroyed the walls to Pike in a single punch. Well, I have heard that he can breathe fire like a dragon. No, 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 he can breathe underwater. Whatever he is, for he certainly is no normal man, he has gotten the short end of the stick. Sea Dragon Point is barely even populated. There were once many keeps there, in the era of the first men but now only ruins remain. The weather is harsh and the only 2 resources they have access to is wild animals and lumber. Later, when all the lords and ladies were leaving, when the crowds had dispersed and only hushed whispers were left of the happenings of that day, Max Vane approached a certain old lion, Tywin Lannister, with the proposal, Lord Lannister. Just the man I have been searching for. Have you now? The old lion watched him like a lion sizing up a gazelle. Yes. He beamed, I am a new lord, I have no capital and only the resource-poor lands of Sea Dragon Point. You have more than enough gold and I am not interested in funding you, he waved his hand dismissively, mind already on other things. Oh, but you will be once you have heard what I can do for you. Lord Tywin Lannister didn't say anything, not dismissing the idea but still not fully convinced or committed. He was curious where this was going. I have heard of your plight. The heir you wanted, Jaime, is stuck as a king's guard, who will never hold titles for as long as he is one, and the gods know he is too proud to ask the king to dismiss him, and your other son is a dwarf, bright, yes, but unfit to inherit Casterly Rock. What would become of the Lannister name with a dwarf at its head? You have heard of my powers, right? To destroy and reconstruct. Get to the point. Yes, well, I can reconstruct inanimate things, but I can also do so with living things. It is harder but possible. Tywin's eyes widened. He had seen what had become of the wall surrounding Pike. He could do that, to men? I might be able to turn Tyrion into a proper man with my powers, no longer a dwarf. Lord Tywin choked on his wine. You can what? It is painful but should be possible. Should be? You say you don't know for certain. Well, I never have tried this exact thing before, but I have done other things, just as difficult with success. It was one of his visions which had sparked this idea, the sickly lion being made into a healthy one. This should be what that vision meant, right? I will think on it. Tywin was lost in thought, in deep contemplation. I will stay in Lannisport for another week or so. You need not decide now, but once I am gone, this offer is null and void. Max smiled, walking off to the tavern he was staying at. Chapter 12, Off to Sea Dragon Point. Max Vane's reputation had soared since he had become a lord. People were still distrustful of the man with cat's eyes, but now, they respected him. He was a lord after all, and his domain was not small either. Yes, it wasn't very heavily populated, but compared to the Iron Islands or the Fingers, it was massive. Plenty of hunting ground, which could sustain his people even in the winter years, and plenty of space for them to grow, with a little help of course. He had almost thought Tywin Lannister would refuse his offer, when the 5th day without an answer came and went, but on the 6th day, he was collected by Lannister men. Lord, we were sent here by Lord Tywin? He said he accepts your proposal. Max smiled. The shame of having the imp be the imp was just too great after all. He rose from his chair, dusting off his clothes, gold and silver in color, with his house coat of arms emblazoned over his heart. These clothes had cost a pretty penny, but he had to keep up with appearances. He was not a commoner from Yeti, a mere cog in the machine of war, but a lord of the north, a man of status and power. He was no longer Max of Yeti, but Max Vane, lord of Sea Dragon Point. In the castle, Tywin and Tyrion were waiting, and holy shit, he looked a lot worse than in the TV show. One eye was bigger than the other, his face was deformed, with unusual proportions, and he just looked repulsive. So you are the one that father is betting my life on? Tyrion looked him up and down. You don't look special to me. What kind of magic will you use, and what is the price? I call it Overhaul, destruction and reconstruction at a touch, and I need some more mass to transform you. I can't create mass out of nothing. I'd need a person with enough biomass. You there, fetch one of the prisoners. Tywin barked at one of the guards. Yes, my lord, he perked up, running outside, before returning with a bound man, 1.6 meters tall with few muscles. It would work, though he wouldn't be able to make him all that tall or muscular, since there was too little mass to work with. He had destroyed a few people so far, so he had the information about how the body was supposed to be like when whole. He nodded, and the guard dragged the captive over until both the man and the imp were in touching range. Now this is going to be very painful, so brace yourself. Tyrion held up his hand, taking a swig of wine before nodding. Max laid one hand on the prisoner's shoulder and one on Tyrion's. He closed his eyes and envisioned Tyrion, a proper man, from his hair down to his guts, and then activated Overhaul. In a splatter of blood, the two men disappeared before coming back together, just as he had envisioned it. The resulting man was 165 centimeters tall and lean, with straw blonde hair, and his eyes were still two different shades, but he was no longer a dwarf, he was even mildly handsome now. You weren't kidding when you said that it hurt, he grunted. Whilst his body was different, his voice was still the same. He took a shaky step, only to fall. This will get some time to get used to. These bones are way too long in my opinion. You really did it. Tywin's eyes were wide. He had obviously not expected it to actually work. Then, his mouth turned into a smile and he said, Lord Vayne, from this day on, House Lannister owes you a great debt, and a Lannister always pays his debts. It was a pleasure working with you. Do you have any place to wash myself? All this blood reeks. He was led into a chamber, where a maid filled a tub with hot water. Climbing in, he sighed. How long had it been since he had had a proper, hot bath? This was simply divine. As he was bathing, his clothes were being washed, as they too were soaked in sticky, still warm blood. He had entered Lannisport a commoner, albeit one with magic, and left it a lord whom the Lannisters, one of the most influential families of the Seven Kingdoms, owed a rather great debt. He made his way to Sea Dragon Point over the next month and a half. The further north he went, the colder it got. He liked the cold. His domain was thinly populated, but he made a point to traverse through the forests of his new domain and invite his subjects to settle down with him. Some did, others didn't. By the time that he had found the location where he wanted to build his city, on the coast, centered around a great weirwood tree, carved to look like it was laughing, he had an entourage of close to 400 people, a number which would only increase over the following years. For now, though, he used his powers to create houses for his citizens. The men and women watched in awe as stone buildings appeared seemingly out of nowhere. For now, Lord Vayne also lived in one of these stone huts. He would later build himself a proper castle to call his own, but for now, this had to be enough. Rome wasn't built in a day, or is it King's Landing wasn't built in a day in this world. There was plenty of food to be found in the sea and woods, enough to feed tens of thousands, not just the 400 which he started with. The day after arriving there, he used his powers to create greenhouses, to be able to grow crops too. Glass was just molten sand, and he had plenty of sand. As much as he wanted to build his keep first, the smarter thing was to build the foundations on which the future people of his land would live, which was food. Chapter 13, God's Hand. Tyrion looked in the bronze mirror again. Still, after 3/4 a year, he couldn't believe this was him now. No longer a dwarf but a full man, he didn't know what to think about it. He knew he should be happy, who wouldn't be? But whenever he closed his eyes, he could still see his deformed face which he had grown up with. And the tests, the endless test by the maester. Reaction time, recovery times, muscle growth, and so much more. It was exhausting, and the sword training wasn't any better. He had never held anything more dangerous than a butter knife, and now he was supposed to wield a sword. He was no longer the imp, but what was he now? To find that out, he'd set out to Sea Dragon Point, accompanying the gold shipment. Lord Vayne's hand had remade his form, and maybe his guidance could help him discover his new destiny. Lord Tyrion, the city is in view. Tyrion set the mirror on his nightstand and walked above deck, where he saw Sea Dragon Point, or rather the city built on it, God's Hand. He was surprised with what he saw. Stone roads, a proper port, dozens upon dozens of stone buildings, greenhouses, but no keep. He hadn't expected it to be so refined or well organized. Most noble houses, which took generations to build their domain, didn't have this level of structure. Perhaps that was the difference of laying houses brick by brick as opposed to in one swift motion. Working and reworking designs left plenty of room for error. The ground floor of a tavern might have one day been a stable for pigs or the like before, after decades, it was reassigned. The natural growth of a city, especially a large one, was messy, but this was planned and executed with a maester's precision. As they docked, Tyrion walked up to one of the many stone buildings. Thick walls, made not of bricks but of one solid mass of rock. It was sturdy, waterproof and meant to last. Even in Casterly Rock, not all buildings were made of stone, there was plenty of wood constructions, especially on the outskirts, and as you got farther away from the center, wood overtook stone, and in the far reaches, there were also mud buildings. This was a fate that most likely would never occur here. When the Lord in charge could create buildings out of nowhere, it removed all the inhibitors which prevented every building to be stone, mainly manpower and money. Tyrion walked over to Lord Vayne's residence, a simple stone building, not totally dissimilar to the others, though it was bigger, and from it hung the crest of House Vayne, the shattered silver hand on a field of gold. Pretty fitting, destruction at his fingertips. Lord Vayne stood in front of it, counting the coins which had been brought via ship. I can assure you that the shipment is complete. My Lord Father owes you a great deal, and a Lannister always pays his debts. He is too proud to try and trick you. Max Vayne's eyes snapped onto his mismatched eyes, meeting those haunting golden eyes with slit pupils. It was a daunting sight, which could rattle anyone. Those eyes didn't belong on a man, which only elevated the sense of wrongness. I don't doubt that, but one of the guards tried scheming off a few golden dragons last month. Let's just say Tui and Law had plenty to eat. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. It looked like a strange perversion of a true smile. That reminds me, Tui, Law, have you caught anything good? It seemed as though he was talking to the air. He saw no one but the Lannister guards around, and he was pretty sure that none of them had these strange, exotic names. It took a few seconds of silence. Tyrion was about to ask, when out of the sea rose two serpentine forms, about twice the length of a man's body and with wings on them. In one of their mouths, it held a large fish. The other creature didn't carry anything. Were these the same sea dragons that he had seen on Lord Vayne's wrist under a year ago? They had been so tiny then, but looking at them now, they were big, and if the stories were true, they wouldn't stop growing anytime soon. Sea dragons were supposed to be on average even bigger than dragons when measured from head to tip of the tail. I believe you have already met? I know, Law, you may not eat him. You can talk to them. Tyrion's fear of the mighty creatures was overcome by his thirst for knowledge. As a dwarf, knowledge had been everything he could rely on, and even now, he was as curious as a cat, and he couldn't not ask. Yes, I can. Law is the more talkative one, though. He stroked one of the sea dragon's scales gently. They love exploring the open sea, and sometimes they bring me back some interesting finds. Of course, to them, food is the most interesting, but sometimes they bring back magnificent finds, like this. He pulled out a dagger from a sheath which Tyrion hadn't noticed. The blade shimmered in the sunlight. Its unmistakable pattern identifying it as Valyrian steel. They had fished this out 2 moons ago, and that was when he discovered that he couldn't change Valyrian steel. Its innate magic, which kept it ever sharp and free of rust, also made changing it impossible. Have you broken your fast yet? Tui was so nice as to bring us a fish. It would be a pity to let good food go bad. I am sure you didn't come here for the hells of it, but we can talk about the real reason you are here once we have some food in our bellies. Tyrion nodded slowly, eyes still transfixed on the 2 sea dragons, which now dived back into the water. Chapter 14, New Insights. Max watched Tyrion, admiring his own craftsmanship, and saw all the flaws which he had left. The mismatched eyes, he hadn't planned for those. The hair wasn't as smooth as he'd have liked, uneven, his arms were slightly too short. To the untrained eye, he looked normal, but Max had studied anatomy once upon a time for art, and there were so many small imperfections. Perhaps that made him human, but still, the urge to try again was mighty. Not that the heir to Casterly Rock would even let him reshape him again, not with the pain it caused. Still, he was curious as to why the man had come to him. In all these moons, the men who had brought him the shipments were unfamiliar soldiers, chosen, well, not randomly. Tywin Lannister didn't leave anything up to chance, but they were no men of note. Lowborn, having worked their way up, no Lannisters by blood, so he had to ask, "So, what brought you here, imp?" Tyrion's fork stopped halfway to his mouth, a hot piece of fish still resting on it, steam rising from it. He didn't answer, just look, as if debating what to say, his brilliant mind working at a snail's pace. "Don't get me wrong, it is nice seeing my creation, but you haven't come here for shits and giggles. The Lannisters don't do random, your father doesn't, your sister doesn't, and certainly, you don't either. So what is it?" His golden eyes pierced Tyrion like a hot poker in the eye, leaving the man squirming under the gaze. "Would you believe me if I said I enjoy northern women?" he joked. "While I can't say if that is true or not, it isn't the reason you came. There are no brothels in God's hand, 7 hells, the city hasn't been a thing for a year yet. You'd be better served at White Harbor or even Winterfell." Tyrion perked up. 7 hells? You worship the 7? I would have thought you'd convert to the old gods, being in the north. "I do not worship either. It is simply an expression. Weirwoods hold power, they connect the land where they stand, yes, but are they truly the faces of the gods? That I don't know, and no one else can either. It is a matter of faith, and I am not a pious man, but we are getting off topic here. The reason you came, Tyrion, and don't try redirecting again." Tyrion let out a weary sigh, letting the fork fall onto the table and holding his head in between his hands. "Before I say anything, I must tell you, I am grateful for everything. It is amazing, a miracle even, but well, I don't know who I am anymore." The imp, that was more my name than Tyrion Lannister had ever been. I had no great body, I could not wield a sword, so I made my mind my weapon of choice. Books sharpened my mind like a whetstone might sharpen a blade, and I was satisfied with that. Did I wish for my father's approval? Sure, what man doesn't, especially when your father is Tywin Lannister, but I was happy, just me, my books, and plenty of pussy. But now? Now I am no longer the imp, I am just Tyrion Lannister, and I have lost a part of myself. My lord father wants me to become a great warrior, like my brother is. The Maester sees me as an interesting experiment, and me? I don't even know what I want anymore. What should I want? I should be happy, but I'm not. He spoke without stopping for breath, getting faster and faster as he talked. When he was done, Max let him breathe before setting down his cutlery. "Tyrion, you are no longer a dwarf, but you'll always be the imp. And I don't mean it as an offense, no. What I want to tell you is that mind and body go hand in hand. Maesters have great minds without being a dwarf, and most dwarves aren't as well read as you are. You need not forsake what made you feel whole. The mind is a weapon like any other. Don't focus solely on your sword and let your mind drag behind, that isn't in your nature. You need to strike a balance. A well-read lord and a well-trained lord have different skills. Only when one combines these two does one get a well-rounded leader. That is the difference between a good lord and a great lord. You have a head start when it comes to the mind. It won't be easy, becoming a warrior, it will take years of hard work, but if you keep your mind sharp, your body with enough determination will follow." Max took up his fork again and raised it to his mouth. He had given him all the wisdom he could, now it was on Tyrion to take it and put it into use. He hoped it was enough. Tyrion silently continued eating. His mind was working in overdrive, trying to digest the advice. The day was young and he would have plenty of time to think about it. Lord Vayne had other matters to attend to, so he left him alone. The farmers had been complaining about the land being too uneven to let the crops grow properly. It was an easy fix, one swipe with his fingers and he did a normal man's work of a week. Sea Dragon Point didn't have the best terrain, but that could be fixed. At first, the greenhouses had been enough to feed the population, but as they grew, so did the need for food. More fishermen went out and more fields needed to be tilled. Lord Vayne had his hands full, creating more housing and farmlands, gathering taxes, and keeping book. He had no maester, not yet, so he had to do all the paperwork himself and he couldn't send ravens. Each time he wanted to send a message, he had to send a messenger, either by sea for the southern lands or by land for the north. He had requested a maester a few moons ago. Right about now, the messenger should be arriving at Old Town with his official request to the citadel. Chapter 15, The Citadel. Old Town was beautiful in the warm summer's day. The Reach was a beautiful place, Ronnie had to say. Green fields as far as the eyes could see and waters warm enough to swim in. Not that he did all that much swimming. He was holed up in the halls of the citadel, studying and more importantly for what is happening, delivering messages from one part of the citadel to the other. Right now, he was carrying a letter to the seneschal, which hadn't been delivered by Raven but by a man. Ronnie wondered what was in those papers. Curiosity demanded he open it, but he'd be punished if the wax seal was broken. He didn't recognize the coat of arms, but he was only an acolyte, he was still learning. In fact, he had only gotten his first link a week ago, rising from novice to acolyte. The seneschal's chambers were quite far up, so he had to climb quite a few steps. When he reached the large, wooden door, he knocked hesitantly, hoping he wasn't disrupting something important. Seneschal Leopold. There is a letter for you. Come in, acolyte. Seneschal Leopold's voice was quiet and yet he heard it perfectly clear, cutting through the silence like a knife through butter. Ronnie took a shaky breath, steadying his nerves. He never got to talk to the archmaesters for longer than a few moments. They made him nervous, those men who had spent decades honing their minds and had so many chain links that their mobility was hindered. His hands shook as he pulled the door open. The seneschal's office was big, looking ever untidy. Stacks of paper were on the line table, hiding away the archmaester who held the rank of seneschal. Leopold stretched his neck to look Ronnie in the eyes. Those deep black eyes penetrated his very soul, moments stretched uncomfortably long as they stared at each other. Ronnie fidgeted but didn't break the line of sight. You have a letter for me, acolyte. Yes, I do. His fingers traced the edges of the letter as he handed it over. Seneschal Leopold reached in between the mountains of parchment and paper to snatch the letter from his shaking hands. He turned the letter over, studying the insignia, the shattered hand, coat of House Vane. Ronnie's eyes went wide. Who hadn't heard of House Vane? Their lord and founder had done something which was thought impossible, turn a dwarf into a full man. No one knew how he did it, what magic he used, but Maester Kralin, the maester working in Casterly Rock, had been experimenting, testing, documenting. Even as an acolyte, Ronnie had 7th reports. Normal bodily functions, a little above average even. Magic, at least the kind in their records, could do many wonders to the body, but they were pale imitations of the real thing. Back before the doom of Valeria, there had been men who could, according to some more or less reliable sources, regrow limbs, and this was a big but the new limbs would never be as good as the one which had been lost. Less fine motor control, less muscle strength, but according to Casterly Rock's maester, that wasn't the case when it came to Lord Tyrion Lannister, not at all. What does Lord Vane want? He asked the seneschal before he could think. He clasped his hand over his mouth. He wasn't supposed to talk to an archmaester that casually. He could be punished for it. But Leopold didn't seem to mind as he broke the way seal and read through it carefully. He clicked his tongue. I was wondering when this would come. It presents a great opportunity for us to learn more. See if he is actually a mage or if it is all a ruse. Acolyte. Ronnie perked up, standing tall, at attention. Bring me Maester Henry, fast. Ronnie nodded, running off to the glass candles, where he knew Maester Henry spent most of his time. Maester Henry was a man in his 40s, with more Valyrian steel chain links than 90% of the maesters in the citadel. There were only a handful of maesters who knew more about the higher mysteries. That wasn't the impressive part though. What was impressive was that he had many links of silver, medicine, black iron, ravenry, copper, history, and even yellow gold, mathematics and economics. He was a well-rounded maester, who would have been an archmaester, weren't he so focused on the elusive higher mysteries. Just as he suspected, he found Maester Henry by the glass candles, staring at the dragon glass, as if it would start whispering secrets into his ears any moment now, a quill resting above a paper, ready to document any changes, though none came. Even an acolyte knew that the glass candles hadn't lit up in living history. It was impossible. Many maesters had set out to try and light them but none had succeeded. Maester Henry? The seneschal demands your presence. Right now? I think I am close to a breakthrough here. I know it can be done. Magic will return and I'll be damned if I miss it. It is only a matter of time. He rambled like a madman. Ronnie could see why he was no archmaester. That obsession, it wasn't healthy. Magic had died with the dragons, as much as he or anyone else would like that not to be the case, it still was, no denying that. Yes, right now. I don't want to be punished for you being late. Ronnie held open the door. Maester Henry looked at the glass candles wistfully but eventually sighed, fine. Let's see what the seneschal wants from me. As they closed the door behind them, seen by no one, one of the glass candles flickered. Not quite burning but an ember of the once radiant magic which flowed through it long ago. To the world, magic was still dead. Chapter 16, The Maester's Arrival. Max Vane stood before the mine he had created. By breaking down small tunnels of land straight down, he had managed to learn that this region, on the outskirts of God's Hand, was rich in silver ore. Sure, he could have just drawn out all the silver with a flick of his wrist, but it was better for the people if he didn't. Mining operations could bring plenty of jobs to God's Hand, so, he created a small mine, which the people could mine themselves. Also, the stone which they brought up, he could use to construct more buildings. He had 10 workers for the mine already laid out, with one acting as the overseer, a simple man who had honor but also knew his letters and numbers. He would keep track of the iron mine, would pay the wages and report back to Max. For the first few moons, Max would use the Lannister gold to pay them, after that, it would come straight out of the profits of the mine silver. House Vane was already a wealthy house in the north, thanks to the Lannisters' support, not as rich as House Manderley of White Harbour or House Stark of Winterfell but surely more wealthy than House Mormont. I still don't understand why you keep postponing the construction of your keep, Tyrion Lannister said from behind him. I will start soon, once I have a maester to draw up a good layout. As good as I am, I'm no maester. I can construct houses, greenhouses, and farmlands, but a castle is a whole nother beast, he said without looking back. Well then, I think you don't have to wait any longer, Tyrion said, and Max finally turned around to see a man in his 40s, standing beside Tyrion. His long, brown hair was tied into a bun and his pale blue eyes glistened with fascination. He wore plain maester's robes, but his chain, it was impressive, over 24 links, approaching 30, and he could see that at least half of them were Valyrian steel, the metal used for the higher mysteries. This is Maester Henry, he has just arrived a few hours ago via boat. A pleasure, Lord Vane. The maester bowed his head, his eyes never breaking contact. I am most eager to help and guide you. I have a few questions for you, my lord. Very well, Max nodded, eager to talk with the maester who had been assigned to him. But before that, he turned to the mine workers, which were gripping the pickaxes that he had bought. Your first shift begins now, what are you waiting for? I don't pay you to loiter around. Why yes, lord. Follow me, maester, you can come too, Tyrion. No, I'll be departing now, my father is probably already growing impatient, waiting for my return. I thank you for the insights you have given me over these past moons. I will miss our discussions. Tyrion waved and Max waved back. As Tyrion went to the port, the maester and lord approached his home. Inside, Max pulled up 2 chairs and sat onto one of them. So, Henry was your name? The Citadel has gotten my message finally. Yes. In the future, ravens will accelerate the speed at which the rest of the world and God's hand communicate. There are a dozen ravens down at the docks and, over time, they will breed to swell in numbers. People say you possess great magic. Many of my colleagues might scoff at the idea, but I have to ask, is it true? Max Vane studied the face of his new maester, looking for malice. The man didn't flinch, a rarity since his eyes had taken on their reptilian shape. When he found none, he nodded, I have a few gifts. And what are they, if I may ask? Shadow weaving? Warging? Dragon dreams? Necromancy? Or? Not so fast, take a deep breath. You will learn of my capabilities in due time, but that is for later. For now, knowing that it's real should be good enough. Now, we have a keep to design. Henry's face fell, but he quickly regained his composure, and together, they started mapping out a keep. Over the next few weeks they designed and redesigned. Hidden passages, both for man and sea dragon, hallways, upper floors, dungeons, and walls. Over this time, Maester Henry also met Tui-in-law, and to say he was smitten would be a gross understatement. He found them fascinating beyond all belief. He wrote down his notes every evening, their size, scale patterns, dietary habits, their intelligence, and much more. He was working on a new book, working title, Sea Dragons, a record of the lost species. Tui-in-law were quite happy to be admired by him, especially since they got treats. After the weeks of planning, he finally began to create the castle out of the stone which the silver mines carried up onto the surface. On the first day, he constructed the basic wall separating the keep itself from God's hand. The walls were tall and made out of continuous stone, not bricks, like the rest of the buildings of God's hand. When the first day was done, the outer walls stood and Lord Vane was beyond exhausted. Chapter 17, Experiments. Max had only managed to build the outer wall, dungeons, and first floor before he ran out of stone to build. He could have exploited the land or bought foreign stone, but why would he do that? The mines would bring him enough stone in due time, he just had to be patient, and he had plenty of other things to do. Of course, there were the mundane tasks of governing or expanding the city, but Maester Henry had also opened his eyes to something he had never considered before. He could reshape the human body, so why not try enhancing it? He wouldn't start the testing on himself, of course. The prisoners made perfect test subjects. Slavers, bandits, rapists, people he wouldn't mind losing and which no one would miss. He had two prisoners in front of him, looking utterly terrified. They were gagged, but he could still hear their whimpering. He touched both by the shoulder and activated Overhaul, test number 1, muscle density. He envisioned the outcome clearly. Stronger muscles, denser, more strength. The two disappeared in a mist of blood and one person was reformed. He looked like a monster, more muscle than should be possible. Max frowned, he had to condense the musculature further, lest he wanted to create monsters. So he disintegrated and reformed him again. This time, the resulting person was still buff but not monstrously so. Still too much bulk for his desire. With another touch, the man was reformed. This time, he was lean, with well-defined muscles but no bulk. He watched the man scramble to his feet. A little clumsy but coordinated, but he wasn't done. 2 people's worth of muscle was possible, what about 3? 4? 5? So, he repeated the process a few times. After the 4th person was added into this homunculus, the bones broke under the stress. Interesting. The bones weren't strong enough to keep up with the muscle power. What if I reinforce the bones? That worked, to a certain extent, but calcium could only be strengthened on its own to a limited degree. The bones could withstand the stress of regular activity, but as soon as the subject tried exerting any amount of force, the bones would break down. Max and Henry brainstormed over the next few days and came to an idea. What if they reinforced the skeletal structure with something other than bone? Stone was just a little better than bone, nothing to write home about. Steel had its own advantages and disadvantages. It could withstand the power of the muscles but significantly increased the weight to impractical levels. Then, he remembered something from his last life: graphene, carbon arranged in hexagonal shapes, super durable and lightweight too, and easy to create with enough coal. This worked wonders. Observing his test subject over the course of a week, there didn't seem to be any obvious harmful side effects from the graphene layers in their bones, so he moved on to enhancing the organs. Over the course of many moons, as the year of 291 reached its halfway mark, he kept building his keep and experimenting with the human body. He fine-tuned organs and observed for any long-term effects. His own body wasn't quite normal anymore either. His muscle density had reached about 2.5x that of a normal human, and his recovery time was way shorter, enriched with magic. He could see in the dark. And these changes were before he started overhauling himself. He had long forsaken humanity, and each week that passed, he realized that he needn't be shackled by the shackles of it anymore. He had no idea how imperfect the human body was before. Inefficient systems, illogical limits. With each modification, he became purer and more divine. His magical development didn't slow down either. Swallowing the sap of the weirwoods all over his domain enriched his blood and flesh. He became one with nature. He could make crops grow stronger, command animals, and of course skin change. Each time he slept, which became way less frequent as he enhanced himself, he took the form of animals around God's hand. Tui and La had grown to the size of 2 elephants each. They started hunting krakens in the deep waters around Sea Dragon Point. Consuming a kraken's heart had granted Max the ability to breathe underwater. The city itself had not stopped expanding. Blacksmiths, jewelers, attracted by the silver mines, bakeries, inns, brothels, tanners, and so much more. The one thing unsurprisingly absent from God's hand? A September. For one, they were in the north; for the other, the seven didn't look kindly on the sorcerer lord. God's hand was a place of the old gods, as the land it was built upon had been for thousands of years. Sitting in his solar, Max was talking with Henry about the taxes and flow of money when Henry sighed, "My lord, you are 20 name days old since last week. We must think about continuing your legacy. A marriage is needed for you to produce an heir. As unique as you are, you will still die one day, so we must do this, lest God's hand becomes ruin once more after you pass." Max sighed. He had been avoiding this, but it was no longer an option, and perhaps it would be nice to have someone at his side. "Send the ravens, Maester. I must find someone from a good family, preferably someone with good connections. I leave this to you." "Very well, my lord." A/N, write your ideas for the Lady Vane to be in the comments. Thank you, smiley face. Chapter 18, First Ride. Max had expected an answer in a few moons, not weeks, but the Mormonts of Bear Island were quick to offer Daisy Mormont. Of course, Max knew what the Lord of Bear Island was after, offering the de facto heir to him. Yora's wife had expensive tastes, troublesome on the upkeep for a relatively poor domain such as Bear Island. But God's hand, despite its short distance from Bear Island, had no such troubles. The port was always busy. Those who wanted to trade with the north had 2 points of contact: White Harbor or God's Hand. White Harbor to the east and God's Hand to the west, the 2 biggest ports in the north. The Westerlands especially enjoyed trade with House Vane, and they had plenty of resources, unlike Bear Island, which wasn't good for mining. It was a ploy, but one he wasn't opposed to. Daisy was 17 years old, having been born in the year 274 after Aegon's conquest. She was said to be beautiful, but her warrior blood scared off most suitors. Not Lord Vane though, a strong woman for a strong family, that's how he saw it. Being from Earth, he wasn't like most Westerosi men, believing a woman was only meant to be in submission to her husband. No, he actually found strong women very attractive. Still, he waited. Maester Henry advised it so. More offers came rushing in, but none were quite as enticing as Daisy Mormont. The phrase, a side branch of the Lannister family and Brienne of Tarth. Now that last one was tempting, for that would mean their children wouldn't just inherit God's hand but also Tarth, but well, Brienne Tarth was still only 11 years old. He was no child lover. So, after some time, he decided to personally accept the Mormont's proposal. Why not send a raven? Because in all honesty, managing his domain was quite exhausting. This trip was just the excuse he needed to stretch his feet a bit. He left the governing to his maester and walked to the port. It was a nice, sunny day, even this far in the north, there laid little snow. Not that the cold bothered him any more. He could encase himself in ice for hours without risking frostbite. He had studied the anti-freezing enzymes in penguin blood, and by studied, he meant he had disassembled them and had thus gained knowledge of these enzymes. He had already been frost-resistant before that, but now the cold didn't bother him anymore, something which would be very useful during the long night. The long night, it was still years away, but he needed to start planning yesterday. That was actually why he had agreed to the experiments in the first place. A human against another would die 9 out of 10 times, and he was desperate to better those odds. He couldn't go around creating super soldiers, not right now, but after the threat of the others was revealed, he could offer this as a way to even the odds. Standing on the wooden port, he called out, "Tui! Law! We are going to go on a little journey." "Really, father?" La's voice echoed through his mind. "You haven't left far from that stone contraption in so long. Where are we going?" "I suggest we visit the Krakens again, they are always so yummy." "No, Law, we are traveling north to Bear Island." He could feel his disappointment through their bond, but Tui sent a quick pulse of understanding through it. Tui didn't talk much, keeping to herself, whilst Law was always eager to bubble out words. She observed silently, letting her emotions speak for themselves. She didn't talk, but Max always knew what she meant. "You have grown quite big. I think it's time to finally ride you." Now Law and Tui perked up. They had heard his stories about the dragon riding Targaryens and were both eager to experience it too. Silently, the two sea dragons stared at each other to see who would be allowed to carry their father through water and air. Sensing their rivalry through their bond, which would surely soon evolve into a fight, Max Vane spoke up, "I'll ride on you, Law, on the way there, and on you, Tui, on the way back." This seemed to appease the two mythical creatures, and Law, looking as smug as a sea dragon could, offered him his serpentine body. Riding on Law felt strangely natural. Thanks to his water breathing, they could even travel underwater, a truly amazing sight, with fish swimming right beside them. Now, they ate fish, but not these small ones. As amazing as the underwater travel was, flying was even better. It was a rush like no other. Even skin changing into birds wasn't as free as this. It took only from sunrise to almost sunset for them to arrive at Bear Island. They scared a few fishermen when they broke through the ocean's surface. The island was one big forest. Lord Vane couldn't even see Mormont Keep behind the gnarled oaks and tall pines. "You two explore a bit, I have important things to do." Tui and Law nodded and shot back into the water, leaving Max to ask a nearby small folk, "So, where is Mormont Keep?" Who are you?" The man looked quite stunned, so much so that he didn't even add "my lord" to the end of his sentence. "A friend of the Bear Lords," he smiled, "I'll give you a silver stag if you show me the way." He flashed the coin and greed showed in the man's brown eyes. This was quite a bit of money for a small folk, even more so in a place as poor as Best Island. "Oh, of course, my lord, follow me." He left behind the basket he had been carrying and guided the lord deeper into the island, through a quite scenic route which was beautiful and, more importantly, remote. Anyone who tried attacking Mormont Keep would have to venture through deep, winding paths, which the defenders could use to ambush them. Chapter 19, Mormont Keep. The Mormont Keep was entirely made out of wood, deep inside the forests of Bear Island. It didn't need to be made out of stone, but it also couldn't. The Mormonts had never been the most wealthy, but ever since Yoram Mormont had married Linus Hightower, the already sparse amount of golden dragons was approaching zero at alarming speeds. That woman would one day cause Yoram Mormont to turn to slavery, going into exile for it, where, once he could no longer provide her that lifestyle, she would leave him for a merchant prince. It was quite tragic but unavoidable. This marriage could perhaps push back the timeline a few years, but more realistically, with more income, Linus's demands would grow in extravagancy. Feasts, scented oils, silken dresses, fine jewelry. People like her wouldn't be satisfied with the same lifestyle forever. As they gained more assets, their spending would increase just as much. There it is, my lord. The small folk held up a hand and Max Vane placed a silver stag into it. The man clutched it to his chest and ran like his life depended on it, a big, toothy smile plastered over his face. "Halt, who are you?" one of the guards in front of the keep's main entrance asked, voice as sharp as steel and face blank, perhaps a little bored. He wore leather armor and a sword hung by his side, castle-forged steel. For the guard at a family's main gate, it was rather plain, but it did its work. No one found Mormont Keep without a guide. There were stories of children going missing in these woods for days or even weeks. Some survived, stronger for it, most died, their flesh being consumed by the bears. That was another natural defense. Stray from the safe paths and you run into bears. Have any of you ever tried fighting a bear with swords? No? Well, good, because then you would almost certainly be dead. Lord Max of House Vane. Lord Joram Mormont has sent me a letter about a marriage proposal. He stared at the two guards, who whispered with one another. The wind howled through the massive woods all around, leaves swaying within it. The guard who had asked him quickly went inside, his steps hurried, muttering under his breath, something to the effect of, "Why am I never told anything important?" Max looked up into the sky. It was late. Not quite sunset but close to it. He wondered whether the Lord was even still awake. But, after a dozen minutes or so, Lord Yoram Mormont came walking out of the gate. Yoram Mormont had thick, black hair and had a big beard. He looked strong, as if he could crush a skull with his hands. Handsome and tall, wearing the black and green of House Mormont, a bear on green woods embroidered above his heart. He smiled brightly. "Lord Vane. Took you long enough. I almost thought you would deny me. We were just about to eat before going to bed. Why not join us?" Max met his eyes, there was desperation in them but no deceit. "It would be my pleasure, Lord Mormont." They walked through the keep. It wasn't as impressive as God's Heart, what he had named the castle sitting centrally in God's hand. Holding the heart in the hand, not as big, not as well planned. It was clear that this had once been a smaller keep which had been added to one piece after another, but it was still impressive. The Great Hall had to be the biggest room in the keep, located as its heart. You could reach every part of the keep from the Great Hall, doors on every wall. At the table sat all women, without Yora that is. They all looked like Mormonts, dark hair, strong bodies, all but one, Linus Hightower. Her golden curls contrasted with the rest of the people at attendance. Maege Mormont, the she-bear, sat next to Linus, a toddler sitting on her lap, eating with her. Next to her were 4 more girls, each a little younger as they moved closer to the far end, until the last one, which was 5 years old, give or take. The oldest of the 4, Daisy, was tall and lanky, with pretty black hair and stunning amber eyes, like honey. She looked curiously at him, studying him with a watchful gaze. He turned to Maege and bowed. "Maege Mormont, the she-bear, a pleasure." Maege didn't answer, just stared at his eyes with an intensity that would make even a king look away, but he didn't. After an unknown time, she nodded. "I like your confidence. So you are here to marry my Daisy? You are barely a lord for nearly 3 years, what makes you think you are worthy?" "Maege, I..." "Shut it, Yora, you might be the lord but she is my daughter." Maege cut off Yora and turned her attention back to Max. "So, tell me. I may have only been a lord for under 3 years, but I have turned Sea Dragon Point from a small collection of villages and ruins into a thriving port. There are only 2 cities richer than God's Hand in the north, and those are Winterfell and White Harbor, and I am not slowing down. Hundreds of stone buildings, dozens of greenhouses, and I found a rather large silver deposit beneath God's Hand. If growth continues at this rate, God's Hand might one day stand at the pinnacle. Maej scanned his face before speaking again. My daughter is not just a lady but a warrior too. I taught her both how to sew and to swing a mace. Can you accept that? Why yes, I am a firm believer that anyone can be a warrior, be they man or woman. Again, she scanned his face, searching for something, anything which meant he wasn't telling the truth, those amber eyes locking into his every twitch, like a hawk sizing up a smaller bird. When she found nothing, she nodded. Max let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. That woman was intense. He walked over to Linus and produced a silver pendant. On it, one side the bear of House Mormont, on the other the tower of House Hightower. I created it myself. I hope it is to your liking. She took the pendant and looked closely. Impressive detail. I can count the hairs on the bear. Thank you, Lord Vane, she accepted politely, thumb stroking the pendant absent-mindedly. Well, now that that is out of the way, let us eat. Yora took his seat next to his wife and commanded for another chair to be brought to the table. Chapter 20, Negotiations. I heard you destroyed the wall of Pike with one flick of your wrist, is it true? Lyra Mormont asked. She was a child of 10 with wild hair which refused to be tamed and no table manners. Her eyes were the same hue of amber as her mother and her sisters, that enchanting honey color which seemed to shift in the light. But before he could answer, she continued, and they say you killed Balon Greyjoy and cast his body into the sea, to his drowned god, but kept the head. Do you still have it? Can I see? Quite the morbid question for a child of 10 to ask, but this world was way crueler than his old world had been. In modern times, children grew up detached from death, but here? Death was all around. People die, that is a fact of life, but in Westeros, you inevitably see some death. Real death was nothing like the movies, and watching it happen was different from hearing about it after. On Earth? On Earth most had never seen as much as the skinning of an animal, but here they got the full package. I did destroy the wall, well, part of it anyways, but no, I don't keep Balon's head. He was laid to rest, he indulged her. Can you show me how you remake things? Lyra looked at him with those puppy dog eyes, which could have melted ice. Max chuckled, grabbing his fork and overhauling it. It disappeared and reformed, now as a small bear statue, fitting nicely in one's hand, a perfect toy. The girl took it from his hand. Can I keep it? Of course you can. Idle chatter continued between Max and the younger Mormont siblings, but when the meal was over, he was told to follow Lord Yoram Mormont to his solar as the others went to their chambers. Once the wooden door to the solar closed and they took their seats, Lord Mormont began speaking. I was very surprised when you arrived. I had expected a raven, not a personal visit, and you came alone. That is very much unlike what I have come to expect. How did you sail here alone? The waters can be very rough. I wanted to see how you were like when you didn't expect me. Even the most vile of lords can make themselves presentable, if given enough time to prepare. Are you saying you thought so little of us, that we might be a family of monsters? I am merely cautious. I haven't been in Westeros for all that long, even less so the north. I saw the intrigue down in the south. Only a fool wouldn't be cautious after that. Well, you will be delighted to hear that, here in the north, we don't play these games. We are people of honor, of principle. So, what did you think of Daisy? Max let his eyes unfocus, recalling the tall girl. She hadn't talked to him, as there were a few people between them, but she is beautiful, and if she inherited her mother's strong will make a fine lady one day. Is that so? Lord Mormont, what are you willing to offer me for her hand? Lord Vane chuckled. He knew this question would come, but he had expected it to be a bit more veiled. Indeed, the people of the north were much less subtle than those down south. A trade alliance. I will sell you silver and every other good you might need at a heavy discount. That is long term. In the short term, I will give you 20,000 golden dragons. Lord Mormont hummed in contemplation. Make that 30,000. 22,000, Lord Vane negotiated. It went back and forth like that until they landed on 26,000 dragons. A heavy sum, but one Lord Vane could afford. The silver mines brought that in every 7 months or so, fluctuating depending on a few factors. Good, now that that is done, you might want to retire for the night. I will have one of the guards show you to the guest chambers, Lord Mormont explained. How long do you intend on staying? A few weeks. I just want to get away from the governing for a bit longer, and I want to get to know my bride to be a bit more. That I understand, he laughed. Governing can be such a hassle, the small folk always have something to complain about. I can't imagine how much harder it has to be for you, your domain still being in its infancy. It is hard work, but in the end, it is very satisfying to see God's hand grow and flourish. Lord Vane smiled. 2,000 small folk, and the number is only rising. Lord Mormont choked on the air. T 2,000. How? Bear Island only has 200, and of those only around 60 are men of fighting age. I have visited Sea Dragon Point before. In no way, shape, or form should that place be able to support that many small folk. I know your powers are wondrous, but surely even with those gifts you can't make a wasteland like that house 2,000 people. He, you are grossly underestimating my capabilities. Your family will be able to see the extent of God's hand during the wedding. It is truly a sight to behold. Lord Yoram Mormont couldn't wrap his head around it. He had thought that Lord Vane was simply bragging, exaggerating what his domain was like. A lie built off of the Lannister gold, but he didn't sense any deception in his voice. He spoke confidently and didn't seem nervous at all. Either this man was bluffing to an unnatural extreme, or he had massively underestimated the newly made lord. Only time would tell in the end. New chapter is coming soon. Write a review.